more than a year since I last made a video about anything waterfall related, as far as I can remember. So I thought it's pretty much high time to do something that's waterfall related again. So welcome to the much awaited sequel to the how to paint waterfalls video that y'all seem to like pretty much. So we're gonna do this again, except today we are drawing waterfalls in 4 different mediums, and the pictures for these waterfalls can be found in the description box below. So if you want to follow along, you can get it down there. And let's do it! The first waterfall that we are going to tackle is a pencil drawing. So I start off by mapping out my image with a pencil, and note how the sides of the cliff are sloped down to the waterfall. The whole landscape slopes down to create the area that the waterfall lies in. This is a trough of the river above. This is like the valley that the river has cut in the hills. We are looking up at this waterfall, which means we will not see the river that is leading up to the waterfall, only the waterfall. Then I take my 6B pencil to make some general dark markings on the paper. This is just a starting point for me. You can start however you want to. So I look at the positions of the darkest areas on my reference image and just roughly fill it in. And as I said, it just gives me somewhere to start. The pencil strokes that I'm using here are broad and not really detailed. I'm just laying the color down right now. Now it is time to start with a little bit more detail. I'll erase that construction line that I drew previously. Then I'm grabbing my B pencil to draw in the actual shape of the top of the mountain. When I turn my pencil on its side, it is a lot easier to cover a large area in graphite. By varying how hard I press, I can quickly block in shadowy versus less shadowy areas. I try to leave none of the cliff white to keep the tonal range of the picture down so that I can spend all of my whitest white on the waterfall itself. To determine my dark and light areas, I just have to look at my reference image. I'm not too concerned about precision, as nobody will be judging my image next to the original photograph, except maybe you guys. Okay, I'm done with this now. Now I can go on to define the water from the top a little bit. I just draw a roughish line from the top down, making sure that it looks a bit more artistic than it looks straight. So note that lower down on the waterfall, the water tumbles down in arrow-like shapes, almost sheath-like. I draw basic outlines of these so that I just know where to shade in future. And these arrow-like shapes are larger at the bottom than at the top. So I start out small and then I draw larger shapes at the bottom. I shade underneath each arrow while leaving the arrow itself pretty white, maybe a little bit of shading in the middle. And this shading happens in short, broad strokes. I'm trying to keep the lininess down as much as I can. I can also grab my artist's putty to lift off any graphite that got in the wrong place. Then it's time to detail the top more. I grab that 6B pencil and use short, erratic strokes, almost close to pointillism. I continue the same type of stroke with the B pencil lower down, so that in the end we have kind of a gradient going from dark to light going down, where the top is darker and the bottom is lighter. It's kind of how the water merges when tumbling down. So less of the rock is showing through the lower down you go in that triangle shape. Now it's time to introduce the hard 2H pencil into the mix. This pencil is fantastic for fine details that don't need to be too dark. Using the same short strokes, I add some detail to the lighter part of the water. I continue switching out these three pencils, the 2H, the B and the 6B, to add detail to the top part of this waterfall. I also make sure to give the border of the waterfall on the left side a rugged edge, and I use a scribbly technique to create that effect. After doing the top, I go in with my pencils to create those sheath-like arrowhead shapes that the water makes. So I'm making sure that the arrowheads layer on top of one another, almost like the scales of a giant reptile, but these scales are a little bit more random and erratic than you would see on a reptile. And I also make sure to use my eraser putty when necessary, but I try to minimize the need for it as much as possible because I don't necessarily want to lift off all of the color again because it can stain the paper just a little bit. So in these arrowhead sheaths, the water also sometimes becomes a bit tumbly as it goes over rocks. So I make sure to add some variation in there. When I'm adding variation, I use similar techniques that I used in the top of the waterfall, where the water is a little bit less sleet-like and more individual droplets-like. The lower down we get on that waterfall, the more misty the bottom becomes. This mist is also a bit more grey because it's not illuminated by the light so much, and the dark cliffs from behind the waterfall are showing through the thinner mist. So I put my pencil parallel to the paper and add in broad strokes to quickly lay down color. After this step, it's all about rinsing and repeating. I add the top details again with short strokes at the top, making sure to leave a crinkle in the water streams. I don't want them to be as straight as an arrow. I want that variation that creates the effect of water splashing. You can see how random I try to keep my pencil strokes, and I'm going in all different directions with it. I'm not scared to lay down darker areas, but I usually try to plot out the dark areas first with a nice soft stroke before I commit all the way with it. A nice way to lift out darker areas is to add a thin layer with your dark pencil first, like your 4B or your 6B pencil, and then after this using a harder graphite pencil, and here I'm using my 2H pencil, but you can also use an HB or even a B or 2B. And when you're doing this, for some reason, it kind of lifts out the darker areas. The darker areas kind of pop out when you go over them with a not so dark pencil. I almost exclusively use strokes going generally up and down and steer away from horizontal strokes. It's only here and there when I want to show how erratic the water behaves that I use strokes going in different directions. This is mostly at the top of the waterfall. I don't really think that a technique like cross-hatching is the best to use in this scenario. I would much rather use cross-hatching with buildings and rocks. The rest of the waterfall is pretty much the same. When I start to draw a stream at the top, I draw out the cliff where the stream is not, and then follow the stream down. So I'm drawing what is not most of the time. It's not that it's not. A cliff is, but it's not water. I'm not drawing the water. I'm drawing the cliffs around the water, if that makes sense. The streams gradually get wider as they are falling down, so the top cliff parts often form triangles where the lowest point is where the two streams that get wider as they're going down merge together. And then the triangles get larger and larger as they go down. You can see the erratic strokes that I'm making at the top, these strokes bordering on pointillism. When getting to the right-hand cliff, some fun starts. I have an 8B pencil stick, which is super soft and super dark. The fact that the whole thing is made from graphite means that it's ideal for covering large areas quickly and darkly. This stick does not have any wood around it like a normal pencil. It just has a plastic coating, but the entire thing is made of graphite. After adding in these dark shadows, I go over the area with one of my harder pencils. If your paper has a bit of texture, this technique helps to smooth out the graphite a bit that got stuck in the ridges of the paper. And you can see what a big difference this makes. After that is done, it is time to quickly block in the ridge in front of the waterfall. I'm not spending too much time on this. Then for blending the mistiness at the bottom of the waterfall, I use a little blending trick. I take my eraser putty and choose an area on the putty to work with. I erase a bit of pencil to fill up the putty area until it's glistening with graphite. So now I use that same area on my art piece, and instead of removing the graphite from the drawing, it just smudges it around a bit. After adding a tiny human figure to the bottom of the drawing, this drawing is done. And this drawing took me approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. Okay, quick interjection here. We are very close as of filming this video to hitting 1k subscribers, something that I'm extremely excited about, to say the least. So, I was thinking of making a special video once we hit that big number, and I have absolutely no idea what to do. So if you have any suggestions on what you would like to see from me for this fantastic milestone that we have reached, please leave it in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your ideas and your input to do this video. So yeah. Now we move on to the ballpoint pen. Ballpoint pen is a bit different because drawing over previous lines will have an addition effect, while graphite pencil, if you keep the same pressure when coloring, you can often reach a plateau where everything is similar in tone and blended nicely. The picture we are drawing is a long exposure shot, meaning the waterfall is smooth and streaky, instead of seeing every individual droplet. This is completely dependent on how the camera captures the image, so it's up to you which images you use. I start out by blocking the basic shapes again with a pencil. This gives me a structure to work in. Ballpoint pen doesn't give you as much grace as pencil. If a line is put down, it's there to stay. So you need to be really sure about what you want to achieve and which lines you're putting where. I'm starting out with these rocks at the bottom. I'm not that concerned about starting in the upper left hand corner and then working my way downwards and to the right, because if the ink is dry, I cannot really smudge it too much with my hand. With a pencil drawing, however, I would try to start generally on the left and on the top while working my way right and down. Now I add some basic shadows in with a quick cross-hatching technique. Cross-hatching is a great technique to practice when you are bored, and it works fantastic to shade rocks and buildings and bricks and stuff. The more lines I put over one specific area, the darker it becomes. So I keep on working on those shadowy areas to make them a bit darker every time that I go over them. With a ballpoint pen, unlike fineliner, I have a few different darkness settings. If I press harder, a line will be more black. If I press lighter with my hand, it will be more grayish. I use this to my advantage quite a lot. I often put light grey lines very close to one another in an area to create that flat, rocky face. Marking out the rocks before I go into detailing is really important to me because I don't want to work too roughly when shading them. This also gives me a clear line to work within so that I can create flat rock sides. The rocks in this picture are geometric shapes with flat sides at different angles to the viewer, rather than round rocks. Cross-hatching and just drawing the lines in one direction is my preferred method when drawing rocks like these. I just love drawing blocky shapes with a ballpoint pen. It's so satisfying. Now it's time to start with this waterfall. The strokes that I'm drawing are always following the direction that the water is going in that area. I only use horizontal strokes when there are rocks visible between the water streams. These waterfall strokes don't go in a straight line down. They form little pyramid triangles at the bottom and upside down pyramids at the top. They are often darker at the bottom, while I leave the tops completely white. I am almost drawing everything except the water. I'm drawing the rocks in between each stream of water more than I'm drawing the water itself. I also make sure to draw everything behind the front plane with a little bit lighter pen pressure to create some depth in the picture. Not drawing all of these little streams is taking the longest, and just getting everything in their correct positions is taking me quite some time. There are no real new techniques here. I'm just filling in an area, moving on to the next one, filling it in, moving on to the next one, and I'm using my reference image here to guide my pen strokes. Again, I'm not too worried about getting everything exactly right because nobody will compare my drawing with the original, and it doesn't matter as long as the bigger image makes visual sense. So if one little piece of waterfall is a bit longer while it should be shorter compared to something else, it's fine. As long as it doesn't create a big disturbance in the picture, it's not a problem. Practicing your freehand line drawing skills with an exercise like drawing this waterfall is actually quite a good way to refine your pen drawing technique. You can see by how softly I press with my pen where the water in this picture is a bit thicker. This thicker water is not letting that much of the rocks under it through. Note how I'm also keeping the top part of every little sub-fall, like all of the small little falls, white, and I'm letting my lines reach up until just below the top of the fall, rather than the lines going all the way up and breaking up the picture. This drawing took me approximately 2 hours to complete. Now we'll jump into the colored pencil drawing. Colored pencils are always a bit tricky for me because I need to layer a bunch of different colors to blend them. First, I draw in the basic outlines of the picture again with a normal pencil. Then I tackle the sky. The sky is a beautiful mixture of colors, having blues, purples, yellows and oranges splattered across it. I start off by putting dark and light blue down in the sky, and then softly putting down some pinkish red as well. I'm careful to not make it too saturated when starting out because colored pencils can sometimes get a little bit away from me. I continue laying down color after color, slowly building it up to an intensity that I want. Once I'm satisfied with where certain colors are, I'll go over them with my white pencil to blend the color into the texture of the paper and into one another. This is also a small little tip for when you're working with colored pencils, is to use the white pencil, especially on top of the other colors. Now I grab my black pencil and start working on those cliffs next to the waterfall. I start filling the areas that are the darkest. This pencil that I'm using is actually not part of the set that I'm using for this drawing, but I use it because I like it more than the black pencil from that set. This pencil is making everything darker a bit better. With these rocks, I'm again not too concerned in which direction my pencil strokes go, as long as all of the strokes in one area face the same way. Now that I've put most of the black down, it's time to move on to a lighter pencil. I grab my brown pencil to start shading some darker areas and to lay down a base layer for the lighter areas. After this, I move on to the orange and the yellow pencils. One of the reasons that I chose this image is because of the beautiful orange light that is cast on the cliff face. Sunset tones and warm tones translate so well in colored pencil drawings, and I just love drawing them. Lastly, I also add a bit of dark blue into the shadowy bits of the cliff to contrast with that bright orange that I chose. I can set these colors again using my white pencil. Using the same technique as previously, I put my black pencil almost parallel to the paper when coloring. In this way, I am covering a larger area quicker with pigment. Okay, let's move on to the next section now, starting again with my black pencil and drawing in the most shadowy areas. I'm going to try to leave the water as white as possible for now, because colored pencil does not erase as easily as graphite. So again, we don't want to add color in and then have to remove it later and possibly staining the paper underneath it. Adding a little bit of dark blue in the areas where the water falls over the shadowy area of the cliff also looks quite nice. And I even add in dark blue at the top as well, kind of where the white is blended into the black. I use the blue. Then I blend some of those dark blacks out with the brown again and add the rocks in between the waterfalls. And then it's just rinsing and repeating. Black shadows, brown cliff, orange and yellow where it's needed. I follow the same principles as the previous drawing, namely leaving the tops of the smaller sub-waterfalls white and blending the pencil lines with mostly vertical lines. Now I add the rocks to the bottom of the waterfall. These rocks are behind the waterfall, so I add some brown in and blend it upwards into the shadow and into the bottom up of the waterfall. A black pencil is a great way to add the shadowy areas between the individual rocks. This way, I don't have to draw in each individual rock and color it individually and make sure that it's sitting nicely individually in its individual place. So this just creates the general idea of there are rocks, but they're not too important for this image. So look at the waterfall, it's a nice waterfall. The pool at the bottom just consists of a bunch of squiggly lines in black, with two different blues colored over it. Nothing much there, and the rock as well. I think we've covered rocks pretty well. So this drawing took me approximately 2 hours to complete. I think of these four media, charcoal is absolutely the most fun to work with if you don't mind getting your hands too dirty. I start again by just putting the outlines of my picture down with a normal pencil and then adding in the shadows. Adding in the shadows with charcoal is such an easy job because the sticks are large and cover the area quite quickly. Charcoal is also very soft, so it applies so smoothly onto the paper. I use a piece of tissue paper to blend out some of the charcoal here at the bottom to create that mist of the water hitting the pool below. Then I roughly add in the lines that will make out the various streams of water in the picture. Charcoal is a very forgiving medium and it easily erases, so I don't really mind now. If I make a bit of a mistake, I can definitely always fix it later. Charcoal allows you to use the texture of the paper quite nicely as well. When you're applying it softly, it highlights that little rough texture of the paper. And it also allows a lot of smudging. So I always try to find a balance between these two opposites in my sketches. Smudging is great, but you can't smudge everything, then the whole drawing is just smudged. I'm using my charcoal in the same way that I'm using my pencils in the first drawing. I have one big flat edge on the one side, and this edge is for covering large areas quickly with charcoal. And this creates a sharper edge on the other side, which is great for smaller details. In this image, you can actually see the river that is leading up to the waterfall because we have a bit of a top-down view on this waterfall. And I want you to note how flat this river appears. And you can actually not see that much of it. With charcoal sketches, I also use my kneadable eraser putty to lift up some of the color if I want to make something white again. After smudging out most of the lines in the top half of the waterfall, I feel that it's time to add the details in again. I try to use erratic squiggly lines to create these details and a little bit of texture again. I also use my eraser putty in short strokes to smudge out parts of these lines, but I try to keep some of the details intact. When adding in the forefront of the drawing, I add it in once and smudge it out a bit. Then I add it in again. This is to make sure that the mist behind the forefront is uniform and is grey, and that the forefront doesn't stand out like a sore eye against white background. I'm constantly smudging out my details and then adding them back in again and repeating this process until I'm happy with the way that it looks. Charcoal is absolutely fantastic for working and reworking a sketch until it has the perfect balance of smudginess versus texture. And this sketch took me approximately 30 minutes to make. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and for watching all of my previous videos. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. Bye!